Hi, everybody. This is Lowell, and we're talking about songwriting. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of contemporary songs. Every culture has its own fabric that creativity happens inside of. And we when we think about songwriting, we just kind of imagine that there's always been songs and it's always been done a certain way, and you know, you've grown up listening to the radio or watching YouTube videos or whatever. And it's like songs are just everywhere, and but not every culture has what we have experienced, and throughout the generations, music takes different forms. And I thought it might be helpful to talk about the history of what we can consider contemporary songs in America. And you can really kind of divide it into two different, I guess, origins, or two different streams that kind of converged. And one stream was essentially from Western Europe, and particularly England and Ireland. The um, the Irish would sing these songs, kind of like um, my girl left me, type of songs, and kind of sad songs in the pubs. And a lot of the people over there were shepherds, and um, they would entertain themselves in the pubs, and tell stories with their drinking buddies. And then some of those same people came over to America and uh, transferred everything that you understand from that culture, transferred into essentially the cowboy. And instead of herding sheep, they herded, of course, cattle. And but they still had the saloons, and they still had their simplistic, poetic, and cry in your soup kind of songs that they would tell in the saloons. It was the same culture that came over and became essentially the cowboy culture. And then you had the um, the situation in essentially Louisiana. Um, I Before Louisiana became a state, a part of the nation, it was a province, and it was actually in New Orleans, had one of the really most respected opera houses in the Americas. And people came from Paris, and it was a highly educated and highly trained classical music area. But also, you had the slave trade that came through there, and so eventually, the slave trade and the pain of the Negro spiritual emanating from the culture of slavery began to merge with that classical tradition, and New Orleans became the birthplace of jazz and the blues. And so over time, the blues essentially met up with the cowboy country song. And that's literally the plight of the black man, and the plight of the white Western culture merged and created rock. And so that happened in the 50s, 1950s, and it was building up to that point ever since the beginning of the 20th century, with kind of the birth of jazz and the merger of blues with classical. So you have, I said two streams, but basically both of those streams were influenced by classical music. And so they came together and created rock, and rock was just an explosion of energy in terms of what we understand now as our American pop song. And of course, you can take rock history on up till today, and all these different factions and parts and pieces to it. Um, but what we understand about songwriting today really comes from two streams, and one is One is a poetic of a poetic nature from the Irish essentially, and of course one of the greatest poets and poetic writers was Shakespeare, and Shakespeare came from that region, and so really excellent understanding of how to use words and of course the English language being so rich with and the reason the English language in Shakespeare's time became so endowed with great depth was because the country of England had all these ships that they would send all over the world, and so the English language, all those influences from around the world came back into England. All the different language influences kind of coalesced into the English language through the shipping trades in England. So you have this very rich tradition of poeticism from Ireland, but then you have this very passionate and almost heartbreaking, heart-wrenching pain from the slave experience of the blues, and so it's really a merge of those two worlds and of course classical music being behind both of those from Europe, from Western Europe, and also from Paris into New Orleans. So you have classical music influence in both of those streams, and so you have an awareness of good lyrics, but you also have an awareness of deep emotion and good solid music theory things that are going on all at the same time. So that's kind of a historical context of songwriting, and I'll be talking a little bit more about each component of writing a song. But I thought that it would be helpful to talk about kind of the fabric and the history of what we understand as songwriting in our culture.